Why Trumpian hegemony is in trouble. Professor of Geopolitics, University of London, Inderjit Parmar. Trump's second term starkly illustrates a rapidly intensifying imbalance between consent and force in America's hegemonic strategy. Historically, US favored waging a patent struggle for hearts and minds through soft power. Trump's escalating military campaigns, however, exemplify coercion without restraint. But how far can Trump push such a coercive strategy, and what restraints, if any, remain on president who seems to have dismantled the guardrails of American liberal democracy? Trump's actions signal not just geopolitical adventurism but a profoundly risky reconfiguration of US hegemony, or one that may further alienate allies, erode domestic consent, and ignite counter hegemonic forces globally. Given Trump's ego driven persona, we should have prepared for wars to continue. The imminent threat argument. Trump's illegal Iran offensive began with precision strikes on nuclear facilities, escalating to attacks on missile sites and naval assets. While disputed by Trump, strikes also included on an Iranian girls' primary school, killing 165 children, claiming to neutralize an unproven imminent threat. Trump has refused to rule out ground troops regime change. However, Trump's director of National Counterterrorism Center, Joe Kent, resigned yesterday, saying he could not back the Iran war because the country posed no imminent threat to US. Trump so far has ignored this development, but this is part of a pattern in this second term where he has ordered strikes in Somalia, Gaza, bolstering Israeli operations, Venezuela, and the Caribbean. He has also threatened to secure Greenland. This presents a shift from post World War II US hegemonic methods built on consensual alliances via institutions like NATO and UN to a coercive unilateralism. The America First doctrine seeks to manufacture domestic consent for these maneuvers by portraying them as defensive necessities against radical regime. Yet this is US hegemony in crisis. The liberal international order, once sustained by elite networks of foundations, think tanks, and organic intellectuals, is infrastructuring under Trump's assault. Big power games. How far can Trump take these wars? Hegemony endures through a careful balance of force and persuasion. Trump's campaigns, however, could expand into full-scale regional conflagrations, drawing in Qatar and Saudi Arabia. In fact, Trump's war strategy could extend far longer than rationally necessary, as he leverages the post-9/11 authorization for use of military force (AUMF) to bypass Congress, stretching executive power to authoritarian lengths. A total war of destruction on Iran, however, profoundly threatens Russian and Chinese interests, disrupting Beijing's discounted oil supplies, endangering shipping through Strait of Hormuz, and potentially drawing Moscow deeper into West Asia entanglements. Both countries have condemned the strikes as aggression but offered only restrained diplomatic support to Tehran. Neither Russia nor China seeks direct confrontation with the US, demonstrating overwhelming force. Since Trump, ever the dealmaker, may work to limit the conflict to degrade Iran's capabilities without triggering broader great power involvement, which could embolden counter-hegemonic blocs or complicate his transactional diplomacy with Xi and Putin. War and peace. The US-Israel offensive against Iran has invaded the Great Indian Kitchen, Much of its indignant distaste, India is willy-nilly getting a taste, literally, of the conflict raging in Iran and neighboring countries. Iran's blocking of Strait of Hormuz, which overnight has become an international buzzword and through which a great deal of oil and other vital supplies pass, has meant that the West Asian conflict has invaded our country's kitchens. The deal or rumored conflict generated shortage of LPG cylinders used for cooking among other things has not only led to the closure of many small eateries across the country but also affected households as distant warfare determines the war affected fare that families get to eat. Print and social media abound with tips and suggestions about methods of cooking and recipe which obviate reliance on the errant LPG. Are induction cooktops better than infrared cooktops? A moot point of much mootness, which is compounded by the fact that no one seems to know that an induction cooktop is how it works, and much the same goes for infrared option, which moreover conjures unintended associations with infradig, denoting inferior or undesirable status. Which of these LPG replacing gizmos can make rotis? North India wants to know. Man does not live by roti alone, admonishes South India, and demands to ascertain which one makes better dosas. Both North and South commiserate with each other that neither can make pakoras or vadas or indeed anything at all that involves deep frying, including that perennial pan-Indian favorite called veg Manchurian. Sticks to salads, which necessitate no cooking, exhort health enthusiasts, provoking the righteous rejoinder that lettuce not talk such nonsense about ghas foos, which is more foos than ghas. And for what it's worth, its cold comfort to reflect that come from midterm American polls in November, Operation Epic Fury with its inflationary impact on the price of gasoline in the gas ravenous US is likely to have a boomerang culinary effect on POTUS and his meager devotees who are made to swallow setback and eat humble pie. Biography of Homer. Homeros is the reputed author of two oldest English epic poems of ancient Greece, the Iliad and the Odyssey. Even the Greeks, however, were uncertain of the very existence of Homer or of the time in which he lived. And it is now believed that if there actually was a Homer, he did no other than organize or edit the poems roughly in the form in which they have come down to us. In the 1930s, Milman Parry discovered that the Homeric poems belonged to the tradition of oral poetry in which long passages were committed to memory by bards or rhapsodes and recited in public assemblies or at the courts of kings or chieftains. Synthesis and mimicry. At a dinner party in Delhi, a young foreign academic describing what most noticeable about the crowds he had seen in Bombay on his Indian holiday said with a giggle, "They were doing their potties on the streets." He was adding to what this Indian wife had said with mystical gravity. She saw people only having their being. She was middle class and well connected. He was shallow and brisk and common, enjoying his pickings, swinging happily from branch to low branch in the grove of academy, but the couple was well matched in an important way. Her Indian blindness to idea, with its roots in caste and religion, was like for foreigners' easy disregards. The combination is not new. It has occurred again and again in the last 1,000 years of Indian history. The understanding based on Indian misunderstanding, and India has always been the victim. but this couple lived outside India. They returned from time to time as visitors, and India restored in different ways the self esteem of each. For other people in that gathering, however, who lived in India and felt the new threat of the millions and all the uncertainties that had come with independence and growth, India could no longer be taken for granted. The poor had ceased to be background. Another way of looking was felt to be needed.